Welcome to Music Matters Podcast with Daryl Craig Harris, talking about all things music with celebrities, artists, music business insiders, and more.
Shevy Smith, how are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm great. You have such an interesting background. You're Emmy award-winning, I should say, composer, singer-songwriter, music educator, app developer. Lots going on.
I'm actually only Emmy-nominated. Just like I'm not. I didn't win, but you know.
Okay, we won't tell. Hey, you know what? Even to be nominated is amazing because that's an elite club for sure. So you have an interesting background. You're, like I said, singer-songwriter, composer. You had a publishing deal, actually, and I should say you're in Nashville now. You had a publishing deal at a very young age in Nashville. Tell me about how you got into music and how that happened.
Yeah, well, kind of like everybody, it was one of those I couldn't not do it. I loved it. I started playing piano when I was very young. I was about 4. Picked up a guitar, I guess, around 10 years old, and immediately gravitated towards writing my own songs. You know, I'd kind of seen there was this artist out of Nashville at the time named Matresa Berg. She was my first concert I ever saw. So the first conception I had of music was that this like beautiful woman stood on stage and played and sang her songs. And I just knew that like whatever that is, that's what I'm about. And so I started writing, and I grew up on a ranch in Kansas. You know, not a lot of outside influences. I would kind of ride my horse around and make up songs. And then I would come back, and I didn't have a 4-track recorder. I had just 2-clock radios. So I would kind of dub back and forth between those two things, trying to produce my own little records, essentially. And so around, I guess, 15 years old, that found its way to this super legitimate producer out of New York who had written the Dirty Dancing songs. And so, wow. You know, he was just really well established and just a wonderful producer and really a guiding light in my life then. And still, you know, we're still friends now, but he really liked my songs. And so next thing I knew, I was flying to New York, and, you know, like my first session was in the Philip Glass studios, and G.E. Smith guitar player and Sean Pelton was the drummer. And so I didn't know at the time that's not how it happened, but it was, you know, it was. You
definitely had a guardian angel.
Yeah, no, I really did. And I kind of got in so young that my experience has been that the older people were very protective of me rather than predatory. So I really lucked out in that sense. And so just immediately had smart people around me. I've always been a reader. So at one point I'd read 111 books on everybody's biography and how they did it. And, you know, just trying to figure out the ways that you get from a field in Kansas to be able to make your albums and, you know, be able to make music. And so I was really fortunate that project. I ended up working with this attorney named Rosemary Carroll, who was, you know, representing like Patti Smith, Chrissy Hynde, you know, Regina Spektor, Lucinda Williams, she just had a real roster of kind of all of my heroes. And she sent it down to Nashville, and I ended up getting record interest for sure, but really the publishers reacted. I wrote a lot by myself, and it was just kind of, you know, I was kind of just this odd little kid, you know? And so
what's amazing about that is a lot of people don't realize that the money in the music business is publishing. So It's like great to be an artist, but if you're not writing your own songs, you're not getting. That's really where the gold is.
I didn't realize that either. Like throughout the path, I wish I, you know, was more motivated by following the money. I didn't really know that. I just knew that I thought in songs, and I, you know, kind of spoke in songs, and that was what I knew, you know. So yes, I ended up moving down here. I was like 17, 18. Got a little apartment and started working with some great writers here. I wrote with Liz Rose a ton, you know, got to really work, like this guy, Tim Krakel, was hugely influential, and just got to write with these really amazing writers who, you know, guiding forces. And
that's awesome. And it's nice to have them as mentors. Like you said, you're a young woman in that industry, and also in Nashville or LA can be very challenging, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think also, I mean, like I grew up with all brothers and, kind of out where it's a little rougher. So I was also pretty tough, I mean, it was like it was protective. And also I think getting into it so early, you just kind of like, you got your dukes up a little bit.
Yeah, that's good though. You need a little bit of a toughness. It's. I mean, I'm a musician too, as we were talking about, and like you just no matter how tough you are, it's hard. It's challenging, right?
It is. Yeah, you got to have a sense of humor, a lot of resilience, and
yeah. So a big part of your mission, I guess I could say, is helping emerging artists. So you've developed, I think it was with Khalid Jones, you have Elite Shout, you have your education program. Tell me about how that aspect of your career came about.
Got it. So I went out to LA, and by that time I'd done a couple of independent records and I was touring colleges quite extensively. So my agent was really good at booking shows. So for all of my early 20s, I would play like over 200 shows a year by myself. So it was mostly colleges, and you'd play one place at lunch, and then you'd go, hopefully somewhere reasonably close and play like the evening coffee house shows. And so I was just a bit worn out. I'd been working since I was 16, and I loved it, but it was also this feeling of like, okay, I've kind of been everywhere. I got to go on USO tours and to Europe, and I was 23 years old, and I felt like I was 40. And
you're like, I'm burned out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be honest, I like made a friend who she lived on like in this little surf shack in Costa Rica, like on the beach, and was like living the movie Blue Crush. And I was like, I'm just watching the movie Blue Crush. I gotta go. So yeah, I kind of made a big, decision and left Nashville, went to LA, and honestly started getting into producing. I'd always, that was one amazing thing about Nashville, is I had all of these engineers and my publishers at the time. They would just stick me in the studio, and I mean, we were still recording to like ADAT, so I wasn't quite, tape, but it wasn't completely, DAWs and home recording and digital,
right? Yeah.
I was able to learn a lot and glean a lot from those guys, and they were just very, encouraging, and they were like, no, you're a producer, you think like a producer, like you should do that. And then when I started getting to LA, I kind of started getting asked to do that more than go on the road. And I kind of had an accident with some injuries that made it difficult for me to tour again. So it just kind of like transitioned naturally into like, this is a place I want to be. I want to be able to enjoy the environment around me. And there was the ability to work and produce. So I did, TV and film, mostly TV, honestly, like promos. And so it was just really like quick turnaround, like high creativity.
Those are like little 15, 30-second spots, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You'd have to figure out something that you could stretch into 60 to 90 seconds, but that you could also do like a 6-second like sizzle on. And more than anything, it was like the turnaround time, like I work really fast. I don't like, deliberating over.
You got to make decisions.
On a kick drum for like a day, like I'll lose my mind. And so I really loved that I could just kind of, and by that time I was home studio and I had, like my Logic set up with my interface and everything. And so I could just make stuff all day, which is like all I've ever really wanted to do. And I had a bunch of instruments and would just kind of play everything myself. Right. And because these weren't, I wasn't like, producing these really intricate records. It was more just making sure that it felt good, that it served the purpose. I think it was really good training ground. And I also started just having like little girls in the neighborhood that wanted to learn guitar, and it was super fun. So I would write songs with them, and it kind of really just took it back to who I was when I started writing songs. And it was heavenly, like I spent a decade just teaching and doing production work and just kind of being just chill,
Yeah. So you're doing that, and then you're kind of realizing that there's a lot of young artists too that want to get into writing, want to get into producing.
Exactly.
And you had some great mentors, so you naturally kind of want to mentor people too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I ended up with this amazing roster of all of these girls I've been working with since they were 8 years old. Now we're like 14, 15, 16 years old. And they were getting, by this time Instagram's happening. And so they were getting scouted, by other producers. And you're like, oh,
Right.
hold up. No, you're my little babies. Like, let's make that, So
Yeah.
it also became clear that we needed to be able to offer them a compelling reason to work with me versus these other opportunities. And so that's the point at which I met Khalid, and he comes from a background of esports and, innovation kind of around those technologies. And he's an attorney, went to Stanford Law School. So he's very well versed in business dealings and had, a private equity firm. And so I definitely knew the things that I did not know well, and he represented all of those. So it really, and then also he has a background, he had a hip hop deal. He had a rap deal before we ever went to law school. So he really comes from creative and, writing and wordsmithing background and has a respect for it. So the partnership just made a lot of sense. And pretty early into that, as we started exploring what options existed for these young artists we were working with, he was looking at it with fresh eyes and being like, this business is bonkers. Like, why is it done this way? This is silly, and I think we all know that it's silly, but we just accept that that's the convention. And so we had this little studio and we started having conversations about, how we could create, more of like the rails or the picks and the axes that things run on, rather than just the end result.
Hope for the best, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just trying to figure out the tools that we want to have exist. Like, is it possible that we could create them? And, we're in the belly of California and innovation and tech and, VC startups and everything. So it just, I've definitely been very inclined to take a lot of risks in my life, my whole artistic journey has been a risk. And so it seems, well, that's what's going on right now is people are building apps, they're building tech companies that, get me in the game, let's do it, And so we, and he's brilliant, just a really, really smart on game theory. And, it's been a really fun process figuring this whole thing out because the partnership is really cohesive in that way.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And I was reading about his background, which is, it's pretty fascinating. And it's great. I mean, it's obviously great to have an attorney as a partner, but also somebody that knows the music business. Like, that's the perfect storm, right?
It really is. Yeah, no, I lucked out, but I'm old enough to know it,
Exactly.
There's, many times throughout the day that you're like, phew, I'm so glad that I'm partnered up with this very smart, very capable person, and somebody who really has, he has such a love for music and such a love for artists. And that's what, we've ended up partnering with the Arizona Lottery, who, made this whole thing fly, and everybody there loves artists. And so that's kind of been the recurring theme is, all of us love making our own stuff, but we really like the idea of a healthy artist market out there and, help.
Right. Yeah. And I'm the same way. And I think that, especially like you said, young artists, it's just so many. We all know there's a lot of pitfalls and you want to protect them, especially people that are super talented. Yeah. And like you said, young women, not only young women, but young men as well. It's so easy for them to be taken advantage of. And you just hate to see that story. So that brings us to the Ultimate Playlist app, which is really interesting. I was reading about that on your bio, and you have the partnership with the Arizona Lottery, that's awesome, and that's a very creative thing to make that happen. So tell me how that came about.
Well, that certainly is the brilliance of Khalid, my business partner. So he, through his background and his interesting work, was doing some consulting with the lottery, especially Arizona, but different lotteries, and kind of, helping them be creative about ways they could reach younger audiences.
Right, marketing and
yeah. So we had done several iterations of incentivized listening, basically the gamification of playlists and listening, and just trying to figure out how to incentivize listeners to lean forward, to know the artist's name, to look at the artwork, to have a connection, because I think we are really in danger of teaching this next generation to only attach to songs and not artists, and, only attach to not entire songs, and really, I think, robbing them of a richness of experience in doing that. And so we did, like I said, a number of iterations. This is definitely iterative and kind of the best amalgamation of a lot of ideas. But he was the one who was like, I think this actually, if they'd be into it, this really solves a problem for the lottery and trying to reach younger users, trying to have something that exists online, because there's a lot of compacts within the government and lottery systems that don't allow them to do online.
Right. It's tricky, very tricky. Yeah.
So you're really threading a lot of needles. And obviously our concern was just creating alternative channels that are different than just kind of sending your stuff off to playlist, managers and like hoping for the best. And also during that time, it went, just in the last 18 months, it's went from approximately 40,000 songs going to Spotify each day to now 80,000.
Awesome.
And so when you look at those numbers, you're like, man, if you're not Drake, if you're not Taylor, like there's not even you can't go kiss the ring. There's no ring to kiss. There's too many,
Right. It's too much. There's a lot of noise. It's the same thing with podcasting. There's so much noise out there that your job is to figure out, how do I navigate that? Right.
Well, and then, I'm pro now, as far as I think the best music that's ever been made is being made right now. I just think that, we used to have a plan and a channel and kind of a delivery method. When the cream rose to the top, there was a way for that to get recognized. Now it's just madness. We're so fragmented. I think obviously we see it in our news is the way that we really see it manifest, that like everybody's in their own little fragmentation of a world. And it really translates into music as like, you really can't get critical mass right now.
Yeah. The other part of it too, as an artist with the streaming platforms, it's like, how do I make a living? And not only getting your songs heard, but then that whole component of like, okay, now what? Right.
Yeah, that is, and you nailed it. I think that's what it boils down to, is like, I don't have any, like my lifetime has been spent in the middle class and working class of music. And that's all of my friends. That's all of the people that I love. All of my favorite artists, are maybe cult artists or, are able to tour at a certain level, but, very few are going to become superstars, and they're not even trying to do that actually.
Yeah. They're just trying to make a living and survive, right?
Living. And so, I think, understanding how different the economics are now from, even a decade and a half ago, and how they're not trending in the right direction, just really make me inclined to want to create alternative tools. And I think if we're really honest with ourselves right now, we're telling most artists that you need to create a song that trips the TikTok algorithm in the proper way to give you a fighting chance at maybe going viral, or maybe, even short of that. But I do think perhaps some of the things that we're asking grown adult artists, serious artists to do, lack a bit of dignity, or at least don't comport with who they are creatively.
Right.
Like I don't need, I don't need Florence Welch to be doing a TikTok dance for me. I just want her to go make gorgeous records that, I'm willing to pay for as a fan. And so we're certainly not solving that, but I hope that we're creating an alternative channel, or encouraging people to invest a little bit of time and intention in, seeing the artwork as the artist intended them to see, and experiencing the song in its full form. And the way we've decided to do that is to incentivize listening. So I guess I haven't really explained what the app is.
I was going to ask you, so because there is a financial component, which is awesome, the way you guys set that up. So talk about how that works.
Okay. So basically, it's an attention economy. And so we reason that one way or another, you're paying to get a chance at people's attention. And so we were kind of like, well, why hide the ball? You know, in the old school, you would pay a program director or an independent promoter, and then they would
go out and push your music.
Director a nice trip. And, you know, and it was kind of all this like massaging everything around. But the bottom line is the artist is outputting some sort of capital or some sort of resource to try to get their song heard. Ours is kind of maybe just cut out the middle guy, you know, like let's create something that incentivizes the listener to give their time and give their attention for the chance to potentially win cold hard cash. So we have 40 songs a day that go up on the app. The app's completely free to download, completely free to play. It's nationwide, over 18, and you're good to go. If you, download it, create an account, you're served 40 songs at the beginning of each day at midnight, at actually 12:05. And you listen to those songs. If you listen to 30 seconds, you get a ticket. If you listen to 60 seconds, you get a ticket. Whole song, you get 3 tickets. If you rate it, so you weigh in your opinion, you get a ticket. And if you add it to your Apple Music playlist, you get 2 tickets. And then for every song that you don't skip, every third song, you get another ticket. So you can earn up to 333 tickets per day to something called the daily cash drawing. And that's a guaranteed 18 winners win $50 to $500. So that's been a real joy for me to experience what it is that we have 18 people a day who get a gift card in their inbox that
it's awesome, right?
Just for listening to songs. And we get so much feedback as well of people saying, oh man, I never would have listened to such and such artists, you know, like, especially like cross genre, you know, we'll have somebody be like, I'm a pop fan. I did not think I liked country, but this Tyler Childers song was insane. It moved me, you know? And so I think that's really fun. And then we have, so there's 2 games within it. There's the daily cash drawing, and then there's also the ultimate payout, which is a $20,000 jackpot. And if you listen to 30 seconds of 20 of the songs, you get 1 entry. If you listen to 30 seconds of all 3 or of all 40, you get 2 more entries for a total of 3. And then you can pick your like Powerball. And each month that it's not won, it increases $5,000. So right now we're at $25,000 for that one.
That's awesome. I think that's such a brilliant idea, and it's a total rethink of streaming and those kind of platforms, because everybody, I think, you know, obviously Spotify serves a good purpose, an important purpose, but at the same time, a lot of times too, there's only one entity making money in that situation. Exactly. And it's not usually the artists, unfortunately.
No, you nailed it. And we're actually, our licensing is as interactive or non-interactive streaming radio. So we basically serve up a sample. You know, we're the Costco samplers saying like, here's what it's important,
right?
And if you like it, go over here and buy it. And so we direct people to listen to it on the Apple platform. You know, they can only listen to it one time on ours, and they don't get to choose the order of their song, and they're only allowed to skip 6 songs per hour. So it really, really does incentivize them to give every song a chance. And that's what our data has really laid out, is that I can't make anybody like your song, but I can make them listen to it. You know,
and that's, you know what? And that's the thing. Everybody just wants a chance to get it out there.
I mean, that's, I think our artist mentality is, you're like, man, I think they'd love it if they just heard it, you know, but getting heard is a really difficult thing. And the other beautiful part is, I think, you know, we're in such a data rich time in, you know, life in society, but if you can't get that data stratified in a usable way, it's really useless to you, you know? So there's a lot of data being accrued over on the Spotify platform, but most artists don't have access to that in a way that they can plan a tour or that
it's usable, right?
Their promotional budget. So it really gives them a tool that maybe would be reserved for, you know, the darling star child at a major label. Like now you, as your own independent label with maybe, major distribution or whatever, you can do your own market research and you make your own plan on how you want to proceed with the song. Also with all these catalog acquisitions, I think, you know, there's a lot of entities that maybe just acquired one catalog or another, and they're like
Neil Young or all these other, or Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah, I mean, but like even the smaller ones, like I think obviously everybody's, mind Petty's catalog or Dylan's catalog or Springsteen. We know all those deep cuts, but I think that there's a tier right below that where there's these large acquisitions going on of multiple catalogs. And so when somebody goes and listens, they're like, yo, I think this song from like 1993 should have been a hit. You can, for a very like nominal buy-in, you can test market that and see like, oh yeah, it turns out people in the South love this song, or it turns out, women over 30 in the Northwest love this song. And so it just kind of gives everybody a little bit more information to make smarter choices, because with the economics, you got to be real smart with.
And you need those demographics and those numbers, because like you said, it helps you get signed, it helps you get interest from publishers and all that kind of stuff if you're getting traction with what you're doing. And that's a big part. That is a big role that Spotify has played, where people can see like, oh, they're getting a lot of traction. They can see the numbers, and that's also where your site's going to be really useful for a lot of folks, I think.
Absolutely. And I think one of the other things that, Spotify can show that a lot of people maybe have been exposed to your song, but it's possible that it was on a laptop that's sitting across the room and they don't really have a relation to like what your name is or what your artwork looks like.
Right. It's just background noise.
Like lean back listening experiences. So one of the things with our anti-automation, you can't game this. You can't bot this. Like you have to be a real human being located in the United States in order to engage with it. So it makes our data quite pure. And it also means that you're really getting the chance at interacting with a human that could potentially buy a hard ticket to a theater gig. And that's what really matters. I mean, like that's where any sort of
rubber hits the road and you can, right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's super exciting. And we're going to give all your information for the app and everything else, how to find you on the episode. I wanted to ask you advice to young artists, because that's kind of been your world. Artists that want to get out there and do it. What's some of the biggest lessons that you've learned when you started out?
Yeah, I think really there's, take all the opportunities. Like, don't think that you're above any opportunity. I played on more hay trailers and, lugged around my own PA and that sort of thing. And I think right now there's a propensity to spend a lot of time perfecting your 15 or 30 second, TikTok clip, which obviously you need to have that element as well. But I have noticed with a lot of younger artists I work with, it's almost like they're robbing themselves of the joy of person-to-person interaction. So I would say get out and play live shows. That's right. Really where you get better. And that's also the motivator. That's also like, I think if you do it, you're going to like it. So I would say play live, be the best practicer that there is. I've failed at everything. I've just done a lot of things with a lot of repetition, and I happen to really like work. And so practice is fun. And I still, I'm going to Colombia next month with my mom, and I just was like, I'm going to learn some Colombian piano pieces. Like I've never studied, Colombian composers. And so I'm like making myself practice every day, like hands separate, it's a totally different thing, but I'm having to practice it as a novice who almost, has never played piano. I'm approaching it like a beginner. And so I think that's something for young artists. And I think be as self-sufficient as possible, build your own little, small business that is you, build it up to the point that you have some leverage. Because when we go into, we talk about all these, bad deals, but I kind of have less sympathy for it now. Like people have been signing bad deals since the 50s. By now we know this business is predatory. Like we know.
Exactly. Right.
There is nobody who doesn't know that person on the other side of the table is hedging their bets in a way that makes them the most money. So them's just the facts. Like, you've got to know that, and you can't be naive to that. And if you are, then like, man, you're going to have a rough time in life in general. So knowing that that's, the equation, I think be self-responsible, like build your small business so that when you're sitting across that table, you have leverage, that you have experience, that you're not sitting there desperate. You're not trying to make easy money, that you really are bringing something to the table. And even if, your balance sheet isn't showing that you're making a ton of money, like what they're going to see is that you have yourself together. When I was a teenager, my publishers here, who I now just get to be like adult friends with, they like giggle because when I came in as a 16-year-old, I had a binder and I had every song I'd ever written printed out, all the like lead sheets, everything was alphabetized. And they were like, all we knew is like, kid is serious about this, so whether I was good or not, which I was not, like you listen back and you're like, I've been alive this long, I couldn't be great, and
right.
But what they saw is like, she's not going to stop, she's going to apply herself. And I think there's a lot that could be said for that, because I work with a bunch of young artists, and it's, the nature is to be pretty flaky. So if you want to stand out, like, get your own business in order, get your affairs in order, and put yourself in a position that you're not at, the mercy, and that you can say no to whatever you.
Yeah. That's the thing, as being a young artist, first of all, social media, you have to decide if you want to be famous or if you want to be a really good artist. And those are not always the same thing.
They're not always, but they could be the same thing, like, I don't, I think, some of the people who are, I think we have a great, landscape of artists right now. I think, right. When you hear that, like, Justin Vernon, has Bon Iver, and he has Volcano Fire, and he has, was back on Kanye records when that was something that you could do. And just like, that's really, he's kind of a bizarre artist. He's, like, he's he's doing stuff with Taylor,
right.
But he's so amazing and making his weird little records, and they, had incredible acclaim. You have, I don't know, just any number. I think we're in a really musically rich time. I worry about the streaming economics of like how many people are going to have to go spend a lot of time doing something else so that they can
right.
make their records on the side. And so, that's more of a concern to me, that us as like elders in the business need to figure out the mathematics of this whole thing. Cause
yeah.
It doesn't work out.
I think a lot of the streaming, it's kind of been talked about a lot, but a lot of the streaming platforms got way ahead of what had been negotiated, just from the from BMI, ASCAP. A lot of that just was like, they didn't see that coming, I think, at to the extent. So now they're trying to play catch up, and that's always been the challenge. It's like sort of the cat's already out of the bag. So then, like, how do these artists get paid, and how do they survive? It seems the model is to get known on social and then use that to book gigs. But then there's the publishing aspect, like you said, and you end up being your own publicist, your own manager, and navigating that as a sort of a minefield.
Yeah. Even if you successfully do all those things, like the math doesn't work out, like we are headed, the bottom line is like streaming does not pay enough, even to the people who are successful on it, to,
right.
Support a family. Like it just flat out doesn't work out. And where, a lot of things, you look at Apple, you look at Amazon Music, those are loss leaders under this huge, big umbrella of a tech company. You look at Spotify, they haven't had a profitable quarter ever. They've been like propped up by like VC money and that sort of thing. So even if they upped, their streaming out payouts, it still doesn't, it doesn't work. We're still doing the math problems as though people are buying physical product, and
exactly,
and that, like, at some point, it's, the music's going to stop. Like at some point we're all going to look up and be like, okay, we've all been pretending this math works out, but it doesn't. And so that's the thing that I just really hope, it's now my generation that are in these positions of leadership, and that we all can, have frank discussions about, like, we've, in video streaming, like there's they've not compromised the value of their art or their product. Like the creators in that world are getting paid handsomely.
Right.
We're the only format where in music where we've put literally everything that's ever existed is available for less than what is, like HBO Max doesn't have every show that's ever existed. They just have their own little catalog, and I pay more for HBO Max than I do for Spotify.
Exactly.
And
right.
It's the thing where like we kind of got to, really reevaluate. But I mean, that's not what we're here for. That's like we're just trying to like help along the situation as it is. But yeah, the economics of it really concern me just because I love artists. I love albums.
You want people to be able to survive.
I want this to like continue, and I want the generation after me and after that to like know a world where you can make a middle-class living as an artist, as a creator, as creative contributor to these projects. And so
and I like the middle class. I mean, there was a quote in your bio about the middle class when related to the app and middle class musicians, and I think that's true. Like we need that because we have the starving artists. We all know that. We have the Taylor Swifts, but we need that middle. The middle is important.
Absolutely. I mean, we're carpenters. We build stuff. We're
craftsmen.
It's really a craft, and that's you go into any writing room in this town, like they're building something based upon a lot of experience, a lot of skill, and with a lot of expertise. And so
right.
I hope that we work out ways that people are still going to be inclined to go into the field.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's super important and also develop the future. That's where the future is. It's right there in that middle class working songwriter, working artist zone. Tell people how they can find you online and also your app.
Okay. You can go to ultimateplaylist.app. And that's where you can and that's our website. So just ultimateplaylist.app. And that gives you the link to both the App Store and Google Play. So we have both iOS and Android. And then you just download the app, and the rest, we've hopefully built it in an intuitive way that, you're kind of led through the registration process, and then you just press play and you react and you let us know and give us your feedback on songs, and your tickets are automatically entered for the drawing, and you'll hopefully get an email the next day saying that you won $100 or $500 or $250. And so you can go to ultimateplaylist.app for that. Or, if you're super sophisticated, you can go straight to App Store and just type in Ultimate Playlist. Same thing with Google Play. We're searchable on those. And I encourage everybody to get in there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so we're going to put links for your website. We'll put links for the app website, all that stuff on the episode. And thank you so much for joining us. You have such a great background that can really is so beneficial for young artists. I think it's super important to get that information out there.
Yeah, I appreciate you giving me the forum to do so. You're doing the same thing. I think really taking the time to have long form conversations and let you're using your creativity and your artistry to make a podcast. I'm using the same muscles that I've used to like write songs or make sculptures. I'm just applying that to making an app. So I think that's also something for young artists. Like just make lots and lots of stuff, and
you just got to keep moving, right?
You got it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chevy. Have an awesome day in Nashville. It's one of my favorite cities.
I concur. Absolutely.
Great. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Ciao. Bye.
Thanks for joining us, and please consider subscribing to our podcast and follow us on our social media pages for guest announcements.